Okay, I'm going to inspect this hive. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to smoke them. Just put a little smoke, say hello, I'm here, I'm coming in. Now I'm going to try to open the lid. This one actually is easy to open because I'm using an inner cover. This inner cover comes in handy. See, now I can't open that without prying it. It comes in handy. It keeps them from building up burr comb where you don't want it. So I'm going to open that up there. What you see in here is I've got what's called an inline feeder. I can fill that with syrup, which is 50% water, 50% sugar. Okay, now I'm going to set this phone down and pull a frame out. Okay, so I have a frame out, and what you see here is a bunch of worker bees crawling around, attending to pupa that's in the brood. There's a capped brood. And there's something else I want you to see. What's in the cells, if it'll pick up. If you look up in here, there's nectar. They've been putting away nectar for their food. That's one form of food. We'll see if we can find pollen on another frame. If you look real closely, if it'll show, you can see eggs in there. They look like little white specks. Okay, so the queen laid the eggs. Believe it or not, we have 3 different types of bees in here. We have the worker bees, which is the most common, and in this hive there's probably over 30,000. In the hive next door to it, there's probably over 50,000. And then there is the queen bee, which she's also a female, and her job is to lay eggs and let off a pheromone, letting the hive know everything's okay or that it's not okay. Here's what I would call a just-in-case cell. Notice it's not a hexagon, it's round. Okay. Now this is a place where if there was an egg in there, she would be trying to lay a queen cell. And that would be inconvenient, as I don't want them to swarm, but that's how they would reproduce. Half of the hive would stay here, and the other half would go with the current queen and create another colony. Now there's another bee that I haven't seen yet on here, and it's probably going to be in a different part, and that is a drone bee. That is the male. There's not very many of those in the hive. Let's see if I can find one. So I didn't find a drone yet, but I did find some drone comb. Notice the size difference of this comb versus that. You can see there's some cells poking out there. Those are actually drone cells in there. They're much bigger. In fact, let's take a look. They won't like this, but you can see the size difference. Let's pop this one open, see what's in there. So you can see the pupa, and they'll probably cover that back up. See it in there? That's actually a drone, so that's a male bee. That was not fertilized when the queen went to lay that egg. Let's keep looking, see if we can find anything else more interesting. Okay, more interesting, we found it. What do you notice about this bee right here? Anything? This is the queen. There's only one per hive. And see all the workers tending around to her? They're actually coaxing her on, and they're taking care of her needs. There she is laying right there. She just laid an egg. How cool is that? You got to see her. She's laying an egg. She lays about 2,000 eggs a day. That's what she does. Absolutely amazing. This is actually the first time that I've seen this queen since I've gotten the swarm. And she would have looked very different when I got the swarm because they would have starved her so that she was light enough to fly. Right now she's not able to fly. She's too big. Got that abdomen full of eggs. Look at that. That is so cool. So she's laying eggs. There she goes. So another thing you can see sometimes when you're looking around is you can see the bees communicate. They do a thing called a waggle dance. They'll dance around back and forth, do circles in different directions, and each one of those movements has a meaning. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to communicate where nectar might be, pollen. There's the queen right there. They're used to being in the dark, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one back in. But there she is. That's pretty cool, class. You got to see her doing her thing. They're taking care of her. Her excrement, they haul it out, they feed her, they groom her, everything. And she lets off a pheromone that all of these bees recognize. This is her queen, and they will defend her to the death. I hope this lighting is pretty good, but you can see the different types of pollen that they've collected. And then there's eggs laid in there. And then the brood, the capped brood with larvae, and pupa in there. What happened here is the queen laid in this center section, and then they hatched, and then she relayed, and you can see down in there, you can see the pupa, that they're going to be capped, and the larvae, all at these different stages. I love the colors of pollen. The honeybee is just incredible, and you can see that God's hand in so much of beekeeping. I'm going to put this away. So the workers, they spend 21 days in the hive. And you're like, okay, what's so special about that? Well, it actually takes 21 days for them to go from an egg to an adult. They spend 21 days working around in the hive, and then they spend 21 days outside the hive, if they survive. 21 days, 21 days, 21 days. And there is a drone. But you can see the evidence of our Creator in so many areas, from the honeycomb structure to the way that they communicate, the way that they do all the different roles, and even the times. See if I can get you a drone on camera while holding it. They're getting a little agitated. The bees don't like to be cold. There's some pollen on one of those. You can see it on their legs. They don't like to be cold. They don't like the wind. There's a drone right there. See that big guy right there? Okay, so that big guy, see his big eyes on the top of his head? His entire existence all surrounds mating. Okay? So those big eyes, that's how he spots a queen flying up high in the sky. And then he'll mate and fall to his death. He doesn't do anything else. There might be 100 to 300 in a hive. But all they do is consume resources they don't help gather. So at the end of summer, you'll see them getting kicked out of the hive. It's really something. So let's talk a little bit about the roles that they do. Okay, so immediately after they hatch, they climb out and they gorge themselves on honey, and then they start cleaning. One of their roles is housekeeping. They get out of their cell and they clean it up the best they can, and they leave it immaculate, ready to receive new eggs or to store nectar or pollen. And you can see there's pollen in there, there's eggs, there's some nectar. Regardless of what's coming next, it's got to be clean first. So that's one of the first things that they do. They polish it absolutely clean, just like I'm sure you all clean your rooms and make your beds, right? See the pollen right there on that one? Okay? And then the next thing that I was really surprised about is they have the job of undertaker. I don't know if you know what that means or if I've ever heard that, but they actually haul dead bees out of the hive. I don't know if you can see that. There are a bunch of dead bees out front of the hive. One of their jobs is to actually haul the dead bodies of the bees that die in the hive out of the hive. They keep a very hygienic and clean hive. Now, if the queen's laying 2,000 eggs a day, how many do you think are hatching in one day? Up to about 2,000. So every day in each of these hives, they're having a lot of bees die. Now, some of those bees are dying out foraging. Some of them are just dying of age. Some of them might be smushed. Some of them might be carried off by yellow jackets. We won't get sidetracked too much on the murder hornet thing. It is a real threat to honeybees, but not here. So, undertaking is actually a big deal. They do a lot of it. So another thing is nurse bees. So they'll nurse the young worker. There'll be young worker bees nursing other bees and tending to their baby sisters, feeding and caring for the developing larvae. And something that was really amazing to me is, on average, the nurse bees check a single larva. That's one of those cells 1,300 times a day. 1,300 times a day. So each one of these little cells, I don't like it when you blow on them. Each one of these little cells with an egg or larva getting checked on by a bee 1,300 times in a day. And it's all done in the dark too, by the way. So another job that they do is they attend to the queen bee. Like I was talking about earlier, the Royal Highness, she's unable to attend to her most basic needs by herself. And so the workers do those tasks for her, which include taking out her poop. Yes, I said poop. Bees poop. That was something that was interesting to me. Another thing they do is they collect nectar. So the young worker bees also take nectar from foraging field bees that are returning to the hive. The house bees deposit this nectar into cells earmarked for that purpose. The workers similarly take pollen from returning field bees and pack the pollen into cells. Both the ripened honey and the pollen are food for the colony. So, my phone's not wanting to focus, but you can think of the pollen as their protein, kind of their steak or their chicken or meat or portobello mushrooms if you're vegetarian. Another job, fanning. So worker bees also take a turn controlling the temperature and humidity of the hive. The workers also perform another kind of fanning, but it isn't related to the climate so much as communication. They're moving the pheromone that the queen is letting off around the hive. There's also an alert pheromone that they'll let off. If I smash one of these, then they'll start getting angry. They also fan for removing the moisture out of the nectar in order to cure it. Back further over on one of the frames, I believe there was some cured honey stored. This is not as mature of a hive. There you go, right there. You can see it in the corner. So that right there has been capped, and the moisture content has been reduced to about 16%. Okay, and so that doesn't have enough moisture in it for bacteria to thrive. So it's been cured. So part of the fanning is removing the moisture from that nectar that's stored. That's up in that corner for food for the bees. And then another big deal is drying out comb. It takes a lot of energy and resources to dry out comb. Worker bees that are about 12 days old are mature enough to begin producing beeswax. As these wax flakes that come from their abdomen, and they're used for capping ripened honey and building out those cells. And then my personal favorite is the guard bees. So you can see what's going on right here. Bees coming and going. But you also have some bees over here, okay, and they are guarding. Now, they are checking the credentials of the bees coming in. You saw the bees coming in with pollen in their pollen baskets. Some of them are coming back and you don't see pollen, but maybe they have some nectar, or they're coming to communicate what they've found. So you're checking them out. They're like bouncers. Okay? Look at this one getting drug out. Look at that. So sometimes, whoop, and down on the ground. So that might be a bee from next door, and they're saying, oh no you don't, not on my watch. Dragging it out. There you have it. Believe it or not, just like humans, these bees are susceptible to sin and temptation. Bees have been known to bribe their way into other hives. So sometimes the guard bees aren't the best. And then the last role that they play is foraging. So the bees will orient themselves with the sun. They use sunlight to figure out where they're going. And then they will go and find flowers and collect pollen and nectar. Now, it's interesting. 21 days from egg to hatch. 21 days inside the hive working. And then 21 days in the summer outside. Well, that 21 days may be pretty short. They may start doing an orientation flight and get ate by a bird or carried off by a yellow jacket. So, no guarantees there. Sorry about the focus. Well, I hope that was interesting. There's so much more I could be going over, but these complex, amazing critters, they're insects, that God has created and gifted us, the product of honey and pollination, are absolutely incredible. And we're still continuing to learn more and more about them. I'm actually going to take and put a second box on this hive because they're growing and growing and growing, and then I'm going to feed them some syrup. So, thank you for your patience, Mrs. Kind, and thank you, kindergarten class, for hanging out with me for a little bit in the bee yard.